I was only 20 years old when I tried to take my own life, but my story didn't start there. It started 4 years earlier, the moment my wealthy uncle Samuel arrived in his sleek black Mercedes and looked at my struggling father like a hungry hawk. My name is Amara. I was the hopeful village girl who was promised a white doctor's coat, only to find myself scrubbing the marble floors of a mansion in Port Harcourt. Everyone in our village celebrated my departure, calling it a blessing. But they didn't know the truth that my father was too ashamed to tell, that Samuel canceled his debt because he had traded me, his own daughter, as the payment. If you are hearing my story, it is no longer just mine. It belongs to us now. If any part of it made you feel seen, I beg you, don't let it stop here. Subscribe so I know my story reached you. And tell me in the comments, which part of the world did my story reach you? Let me know where this journey has taken us. Thank you. The problem, you see, it started when I was just 16. Our village was a place of peace, but that year, the air felt heavy, like the sky was waiting to fall. It wasn't rain we were waiting for, it was the shadow of my father, Kanu's debt, my mother, Abel, and he would whisper about the numbers late into the night. 2 bad farm harvests meant the debt was huge. You could see the worry on my father's face. It was heavier than any yam he ever carried. That worry was our constant companion. You grow up knowing there are things you have to do because, as my uncle loved to remind me later, nothing in this world is free. That saying became the chain that bound me. Then one afternoon, Uncle Samuel showed up. That day was something else. His car, a long black Mercedes, was so shiny it was like a mirror for the sun in our dusty yard. It announced his presence from miles away. Samuel was Lagos, and we were just red dust waiting to be swept up. When he stepped out, he was big and broad, and the first thing that hit me was the heavy, sickening smell of his expensive, sharp cologne. It was so strong. It felt like another person standing next to him, full of power and money. He smiled, a flash of white teeth against his dark skin, and suddenly, the fear on my father's face looked like it might actually melt away. He saw me standing there, looking like a proper young girl, and he focused on me. Smart eyes, steady hands, he declared like I was some prize cow he was buying. Then he made the promise that changed everything. He would pay for my university. He said I would become a doctor. The sound of salvation. My mother, Abel, let out a loud, shrill ululation of gratitude, a sound that later became the terrible weight of expectation on my shoulders. My siblings, Zena and Jide, started dancing in the dust. I remember the joy, because for that moment, it felt like the drought was over. But that loud ululation? It was a promise I was afraid to break. Even when I learned his true meaning, nothing in this world is free. Later that night, the joy had quieted down, but my anxiety hadn't. I crept near the kitchen because I couldn't sleep. I could still smell that heavy, sharp cologne, even though Samuel was in the sitting room. I heard my father, Kanu, begging him. His voice was ragged, begging for more time to pay the loan. Samuel was so calm, so smooth. He just waved him off. "Forget the money, Kanu. Let it rest," he said. I stood there, thinking my uncle was a truly merciful man, a true savior. But even then, watching my father's tense shoulders in the doorway, I knew something felt wrong. I believed the mercy, but my father's eyes were still shadowed. They knew the truth. Samuel meant that the debt was resting, but I would not be free. Weeks later, when I was already in Port Harcourt, scrubbing floors instead of reading books, I learned the cold, hard truth of that night. I know now that Samuel was sitting in his office, laughing with his friend, Kelechi. He repeated his favorite saying, "Nothing in this world is free." He told Kelechi he had his payment already. He said I was far sweeter than coins. He said it like I was property, like a sack of yams. That's the truth that shattered me. My father hadn't gotten mercy. He had sold me. I wasn't going to school. I was the debt. That day, the sound of my mother's shrill ululation of gratitude became the most painful sound I could remember. It was the sound of my own execution. When the day came for me to leave, The village came out in full force. They brought gifts, yams, dried fish, for the girl going to the city to be a doctor. The whole compound was full of pride. My father, Kanu, stood so tall, his chest out. He was booming with laughter and false pride for everyone to see. He looked like the big man who had secured his family's future. But, just as I was getting into the car, I saw it. His eyes shifted. Just a quick moment of deep shame he buried. He was trying to hide the cost of that pride from me and from himself. He knew he'd broken the weight of expectation in the worst way. It's hard to forgive that one quick glimpse. Stepping into Samuel's car was like walking into another world. The smooth leather seats felt so cool and foreign against my skin. The air inside didn't smell like wood smoke. It just had that strong, sharp cologne smell that was already starting to feel heavy. As the car pulled away, I watched my whole village disappear into the red dust behind us. I was excited, thinking about the university libraries, the white doctor's coat, and lifting my family out of poverty. But beneath all that joy, a small, cold unease coiled right in my chest. Even then, something whispered to me that this ride was too smooth, too quiet. The silence felt wrong, like I was moving towards something dark, not something free. Nothing in this world is free. The wind seemed to hum. Then we hit the city, Port Harcourt. It was like a lightning strike, I swear. Everything was too much. Smoke, noise, and buildings that didn't just stop at one floor, they scraped the whole sky. My village was quiet, but this city was shouting. It was fast, too fast. We sat in traffic and I saw people everywhere, but they all looked separate, disconnected. My head was spinning. The air felt thick and hot. I remembered my goal, the white coat, the money for my family, but the city didn't feel like opportunity anymore. It felt like a trap, waiting for someone small like me to step right into it. The noise was so loud. It almost drowned out the memory of my mother's shrill ululation back home. Finally, the Mercedes turned into a quiet street. We arrived at Samuel's 3-story house. It was a proper mansion, a fortress of white walls with dark, quiet windows that looked like eyes watching you. It didn't smell like a family home. It smelled of polish and cold, sharp power. Even before I went inside, I knew it wasn't a home. It felt like a jail built with money. As Samuel unlocked the heavy gate, I felt my heart sink, remembering the weight of expectation from my mother. I kept trying to tell myself that this power, this wealth, was going to be for my good. But all I could feel was the same coldness that came from that sharp, expensive cologne that followed Samuel everywhere. It felt like I was entering a cage. Inside the mansion, it was even colder. I met Auntie Uche. She was slim, but she had sharp eyes and a very thin, cold smile. She didn't hug me or ask about the village. Her greeting was like a piece of ice hitting me. She just looked me up and down and said, "Welcome, Amara. I hope you'll be useful here." Useful. That word sliced right through the dreams of the white doctor's coat and the university library. That was the exact moment the hope died. I realized right there that I wasn't a niece coming to study. I was just a new helper. The smell of Samuel's cologne felt like it was everywhere, sealing the deal on this terrible arrangement. I knew then that the weight of expectation was going to crush me. That night, I was sitting alone in the big, cold room, trying to process Auntie Uche's words. Then Samuel came in. That heavy, sharp cologne walked in before he did. His voice, usually smooth, was thick and heavy with menace. He didn't talk about school. He talked about my father. He reminded me my father owed him a great deal, and he said I needed to remember that. He repeated it, leaning closer so I couldn't forget. Nothing in this world is free. He didn't have to say more. All the fear I had pushed down since leaving the village rushed up, cold and fast. The dreams were completely gone now. I was officially terrified, knowing I was trapped by a debt I didn't even owe. The school forms never showed up. Instead of a uniform, Auntie Uche had me up before dawn for chores. Forget medical books. My new life was endless cleaning. I scrubbed, mopped, and dusted. I started wearing tattered clothes and a look of resignation that was not my own. This house, which was supposed to be my rescue, became my work site. Every time I looked at the big, dark windows, I felt the immense weight of expectation from my village, from my mother's shrill ululation. I was supposed to be sending money home, but I couldn't even leave the compound. I was trapped by a lie, working like a maid, reminded with every single chore that nothing in this world is free. I was forced to scrub those fine marble floors, carry huge baskets of laundry, and polish glass until it shone. My hands, the same hands that were supposed to hold a scalpel one day, became cracked and raw from the harsh soap and the endless work. That expensive house wasn't just a place. It felt like a monster I had to feed with my own labor every day. When Samuel passed me, sometimes he wouldn't even see me, but I'd always smell that heavy, sharp cologne. It was a constant reminder of the owner of the house and the cost of everything. My life was dirt and pain, and his life was perfume and wealth. And all of it was because nothing in this world is free. After a few weeks of being treated like a slave, I finally gathered the courage to ask Auntie Uche about the school registration. I asked her very timidly, my hands still raw and hurting. She just stopped what she was doing and laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was sharp, a very cutting sound. She looked down at me and said, "School? We'll see. For now, you must earn your keep. Earn my keep." Just like that, she told me that the promise, the dream, was a joke. I felt so small, so worthless, standing there in the middle of that big, empty house. Every day, the weight of expectation from my village felt heavier, but I couldn't even stand up for myself. I was truly trapped. I decided to try again, this time at the dinner table. It was scary, but I needed to know. I asked Samuel about university, trying to sound respectful. Before he could even open his mouth, Uche snapped at me. "You dare question him? Learn your place," she yelled. The moment shattered the quiet of the dining room. Samuel just looked at me and told me I must show us you can be trusted before thinking of school. It was all so clearly a lie now. The air was thick with the heavy, sharp cologne, and that smell felt like the scent of deception. The beautiful house was turning ugly, and I knew the truth was staring right at me. Impossible to ignore. They weren't going to let me go. I was just a possession. Later that evening, the truth finally hit me like a physical blow. Samuel cornered me when Uche wasn't around. He wasn't smiling. He was just cold. He looked right into my eyes and called me his substitute for the debt. He said my father's loan was gone because I was there in the house. That was the moment I finally understood. I wasn't going to be a doctor. I was just currency. I was breathing the scent of his expensive cologne, and my body was shaking. That heavy, sweet smell now represented the betrayal. All this time, I thought I was working for my future, but I was actually paying for my father's past. He didn't even have to say, "Nothing in this world is free," because I finally knew it. I panicked, truly terrified. I grabbed my phone and tried to call my mother, Apple. The signal was poor as always, and I was shaking so much I couldn't hear anything. Before I could move, Uche was there. Her eyes were blazing, and she snatched the phone right out of my hand. She didn't shout, she whispered, and that was worse. She threatened to make my parents regret ever giving birth to you. That threat hit me hard. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about the weight of expectation my family carried. I couldn't risk them. I was utterly trapped. Every corner of that fancy mansion now a proper prison, and I knew that trying to escape would just bring them suffering. After that night, Samuel started getting bolder. He began to stalk me, especially when Uche wasn't around. One evening, I was alone in the kitchen washing dishes when he came in. That sickening heavy, sharp cologne flooded the small space. His voice was thick. He didn't even pretend anymore. He admitted school was just the bait, and I, in my flesh, was the real payment. I felt my stomach drop. I just ran. I fled, pushing past him, spilling soapy water all over the clean marble floor. I ran toward the back door, desperate to get away from him, desperate to get away from the sound of him breathing near me, reminding me that nothing in this world is free. I got to the glass door, and through it, I saw Mr. Osas, the security guard next door. He was just standing by his gate. Our eyes met, and he didn't look at me the way men like Samuel did. He looked at me with concern. He saw the panic on my face and the terror in my eyes. It was a small thing, but it hit me hard. He was the first person in this city, the first stranger who didn't feel dangerous. Just seeing his steady eyes gave me a tiny bit of air to breathe in that moment. For the first time since leaving home, I felt like someone outside this dark house might actually see me. Just then, Mr. Osas leaned over the fence. He spoke softly, barely a whisper. "If you ever need help, knock on my gate 3 times, he told me. A means of escape. That tiny offer of freedom was like a shock to my whole system. But before I could even nod, Samuel was behind me, grabbing my wrist so hard it bruised. That sharp smell of his cologne felt like a hand over my mouth. He dragged me back inside immediately, his eyes narrowed and dangerous. He warned me never to talk to the guard again. The moment I felt seen was the same moment I was pulled back into the golden cage. He wanted me to know that his rule, that nothing in this world is free, extended even to a simple glance. Then came the night Uche was away. It was inevitable, I suppose. Samuel came into my room, and this time, he didn't just smell of that sharp cologne. He reeked of whiskey. I begged him please to stop. He didn't even look at me. He just started talking, telling me that my father had practically pleaded on his knees for him to take me. He said I was his reward. Hearing that my own father begged him to take me as payment, snapped something deep inside me. I realized my escape wasn't just physical. It was freeing myself from the weight of expectation my father had placed on me. The lie had finally run out of road. That was it. Hearing him say my father begged him, it made me forget the fear. I snapped. I saw the glass of whiskey in his hand, and I just pushed him with all the strength I had left in my body. The glass flew, hitting the marble floor, and the sound of the second shattered whiskey glass was like a gunshot in that quiet house. It was the sound of my own false hope breaking apart. Samuel was stunned, completely shocked that I would dare touch him. He was fuming, smelling of that terrible cologne mixed with whiskey. He started raising his hand to strike me, and I braced myself for the blow. I didn't care anymore. At least I had fought back. He stood there, hand raised, ready to strike, but then a voice cut through the silence. It was Ada, the other house help. She was usually quiet and invisible. She called out suddenly, just saying some small thing about an errand that couldn't wait. It was trivial, but it worked. Samuel turned, stunned by the interruption, and the blow never landed. Ada didn't look at me, but she saved me in that moment. You hear? The sound of the shattered whiskey glass was still echoing, a loud signal that things were changing. I realized that the people trapped in the golden cage with me might just be the ones who could fight back, even if they couldn't stand up to the stench of that cologne or his terrible power. Later, Ada found me. She didn't have to say a lot. She was quiet, like always, but she sat with me. She gently looked at the bruises Samuel left on my wrist from dragging me away earlier. She saw the fresh cuts on my hands from the scrubbing. Then she just whispered one thing, I know. That was it. I felt a small seed of hope bloom inside my chest. It was the first moment of true connection I'd had since leaving home. She didn't ask me to be strong or tell me I needed to run. She just saw my pain and understood. In that terrible house, surrounded by the constant threat of that cologne and the memory of the shattered whiskey glass, I knew I wasn't fighting alone anymore. I had an ally. Ada became my secret lifeline. She couldn't speak openly, but she left me small, silent comforts. A perfectly boiled egg hidden in my laundry, or some cooling ointment for my raw hands. She would just nod when our eyes met. She whispered that she was looking for a way, that she would find a means for me to escape this place. It was a huge risk for her, but it taught me that not all family or all people were betrayers. Despite Samuel's terrible mantra, nothing in this world is free, Ada was giving me something truly precious for nothing at all. Her kindness gave me strength to face the next day and the next. I knew I had to be strong for her now too. But if Ada was my lifeline, Uche was my poison. After the kitchen incident, she knew what was happening, but she didn't blame Samuel. Her eyes filled with bitter, pure jealousy towards me. She started leaving me only scraps of food, making sure I was hungry. She called me a husband snatcher and acted like I was the one begging for Samuel's attention. That was when I realized the sickness of that house. Uche was just as much my abuser as he was. She consented to the whole thing. The scent of Samuel's cologne hung in the air, a reminder of the two people who owned me, both working together to make sure I believed that because of their debt, nothing in this world is free. The assaults didn't stop. They kept happening, but something in me shifted. I couldn't fight them physically every time, but I could fight them inside my head. I started to count them. I carved 20 incidents right into my soul. The counting wasn't about the pain. It was about keeping my mind separate from my body. It was a way to watch the person it was happening to, so I could remind myself, that's not really me. It was a way to survive the heavy, sharp cologne and his hands. Every number was a secret mark of resistance, a way to remember that Samuel hadn't completely broken me yet, no matter how many times he tried to prove that nothing in this world is free. When the situation became too much, when the weight of that debt was suffocating me, I found a way to leave the room without moving my body. I learned to drift. I would pretend I was back in the village, smelling the wood smoke and the wet earth. I would listen for my mother's voice, for the echo of her shrill ululation of gratitude, the same sound that put me here, but which was now the only sound of home. I used those memories to keep my spirit alive. It was the only place Samuel's cologne couldn't reach me. That mental escape kept my real self from being completely erased. I knew I had to hold on to the girl who wanted to be a doctor, because if I lost her, Samuel would win. Proving that nothing in this world is free was the ultimate truth. My drifting gave me strength, and one day, Ada came to me with a real plan. She didn't whisper this time. Her voice was low and firm. She told me her nephew, Obi, works with people who fight men like Samuel. People who fight this kind of invisible slavery. It was a terrifying risk, you know? If Samuel found out, I don't know what he would do to her or to me. She told me I had to be brave and prepared to leave everything. I looked at the dark stain on the floor where the shattered whiskey glass had been. That sound, the sound of my snap, was all the bravery I had. I decided I would risk it. I couldn't live one more day in the shadow of that heavy cologne, proving that Samuel was right when he said, nothing in this world is free. I needed to be free. Even as Ada and I made our plan, I found comfort in another watchful eye. Mr. Osas, the security guard next door, never stopped watching the house. Every day when I was outside scrubbing the fence or sweeping, I would see him. His gaze was steady, not judging or lustful, just concerned, like before. His silent promise to knock 3 times was a rope he kept throwing over the wall for me. It was a visible sign that not every man was like Samuel. Osas's vigilance kept the crushing despair from swallowing me whole. It was a counter-argument to the constant threat of that heavy, sharp cologne. It reminded me that maybe, just maybe, the world outside the golden cage didn't truly believe that nothing in this world is free. There was kindness waiting. The breaking point came when Samuel stumbled into my room again, drunk and louder than usual. He didn't come for anything physical that night. He came to force me into gratitude. He kept repeating the biggest lie of all, that my father gave me away for free. Hearing him twist my father's shame into his own perverse mercy made me sick. He wanted me to thank him for enslaving me, for taking away the chance to honor the weight of expectation from my village. He smelled completely toxic, the whiskey mixing with that strong, sharp cologne. It was his final attempt to convince me that the chain around my neck was actually a gift, and that his phrase, nothing in this world is free, was meant to be comforting. But all it did was make me ready to snap. I just shoved him. I didn't think. I just pushed him hard again. He was holding a glass, and it went flying, hitting the wall. The sound of that second shattered whiskey glass was even louder than the first. It was the sound of my final act of resistance. He raised his hand to strike me. I saw the rage in his eyes, the stink of the cologne and whiskey so close. I closed my eyes ready. But just then, Ada's voice rang out from the hallway, sharp and clear. "Chief, there is someone at the gate." It was the perfect diversion. Samuel froze, looking confused. Ada's voice was the only thing that kept his hand from landing on my face. It was the signal. I knew Ada had finally acted, risking everything to break his rule that nothing in this world is free. Samuel rushed out, still smelling of that sickening cologne and rage. I ran to the window, the sound of the shattered whiskey glass still ringing in my ears. I looked out. Standing at the gate was Mr. Osas with two other men, not in uniform. They were in plain clothes, looking official. I caught bits of their conversation when Samuel started shouting. Words like investigation, allegation, and evidence. Samuel was raging, threatening them, using his power like a weapon. But the men stood firm, taking notes. I felt a surge of raw disbelief. Ada had done it. Mr. Osas had done it. They risked everything to challenge the man who believed nothing in this world is free. The cage was shaking. I pressed my face close to the barred window, watching the chaos. One of the men, the one taking notes, looked up and our eyes met across the yard. In that moment, he didn't see the daughter of a debtor or a servant or a thing to be purchased. He saw me, Amara, a human being. He looked at me with steady, professional eyes, and I felt seen for the first time since leaving my village. It was a strange feeling, like the weight of expectation was finally lifting, replaced by proof. Samuel's power, all that cologne and rage, was being challenged. The lock on my golden cage felt loose, like I could finally breathe without the constant whisper that nothing in this world is free. Something important had begun. In that silence, after Samuel had been confronted and the men were writing, I realized what had happened. Ada had acted, a silent house girl who risked everything. Mr. Osas had acted, keeping his promise. Complete strangers had come to me because they saw something wrong. The terrifying truth of my situation hadn't disappeared, but it had finally given way to a dangerous, fragile hope. The sound of that shattered whiskey glass was no longer just the sound of fear. It was the sound of a crack in Samuel's foundation. His whole life, he'd drilled into me that nothing in this world is free, but here were people acting for me for nothing. Maybe, just maybe, I could be truly free.